Thank you. Um, Robert, are you there? I see you are in the chat. We need to get you to click your video open and we'll get this
There
going.
we go. Yeah, it started.
There he is.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Well, this is new to me. Robert, I guess you're an old hand at this. But certainly I'm excited to be here. Done lots of Zoom calls, not one like this, but certainly very excited about this one. So for our listeners, I'll just read a little bit. They may well know some of this, but I think it's important just to start us off with a little background on you, and then we'll take it where it goes. And
Great.
And I'll also follow the chat. I do have a couple of questions. I know you've got some kind of a surprise for me. So actually, I didn't have a very good sleep last night worrying about that surprise. Anyway,
Good.
for our listeners, Robert Rotenberg is the author of several best-selling novels, including Old City Hall, The Guilty Plea, Stray Bullets, Stranglehold, and The Heart of the City. And his latest book, which we're here to talk about today, which is, can we see, there we go, Downfall, which explores the growing homelessness crisis in our cities. He's a criminal lawyer in Toronto. He's also a television screenwriter and a writing teacher. So just full of all kinds of skills, and I'm sure a very interesting man. I'm looking really forward to talking to you further about all of this. So I guess we have perhaps 45 minutes, and I did chat a little bit about, I've got some questions for you, and I will keep my eye on the chat and see what comes that way, and hopefully I get some questions along the way that I can pepper in and out throughout our conversation, see where it goes. So let's get it going, and I guess I'd like to just turn it over to you for a second to say what you like as introductory remarks before I start peppering you with questions.
Sure. Well, I'm actually, I hope this is okay. I'm not actually in my usual office. I'm hiding away at a friend's house in a secret location for a week to try and work on my next book. It's been very interesting with Zoom because what you miss, something like today, I would meet all these different authors, get to meet the librarians. You miss the kind of community of other writers because writing is a very, very insular, lonely job. On the other hand, the great thing is that I'm reaching so many people, so many new readers, so many different people. And to be candid, it saves me about 6 hours a day because instead of driving to different places, I can just sit in my office or sit here, and I can do. I just half an hour ago was talking to a reader of mine on Zoom. She's in Germany, so I mean it's quite extraordinary what you can do. And the other thing that's very interesting to me is before the book came out, I redid my whole website. I had a great web designer, and one of the things I wanted to do was to make it more interactive. So it occurs to me now, Mike, that we're all photographers, we're all writers, we're all video makers. So instead of people just writing in saying nice things or not nice things about my book, I'm now having people doing short 4 or 5 minute videos, which I just say, pick any book, say who you are, and read a portion of the book. So it's a new world we're in. I think authors have to be much more dexterous. We all miss being able to go to a bookstore and wander around. On the other hand, so one note, which is I know that this is being sponsored by your local bookstore. I made a real point on my website to have access not just to Amazon, but to any local bookstores. So I want to encourage, clearly the people who are here are good readers, to really, let's keep the local bookstores going. It's really important.
Okay,
there we go. That's my intro.
Okay, well, I got a few sort of general questions for you. I might just, full disclosure for those who are interested at all, the crime novel for me is one of my favorite types of books. I grew up reading these, and I actually wanted to be a criminologist at one point, a criminology student, and thought I might pursue it as a profession. So I have great interest in this kind of genre. So I was really excited to get the opportunity to speak to a real life professional writer. So this is a real treat for me. But before I get actually to the specifics around the book, and I got to remember myself, don't give it away. So the moment I start to say something, please interrupt. I'll try not to go there and put you in the spot. But I think one of the things we thought might be interesting is, one of the things you said to me is, the art of writing and the importance of the opening paragraph. It might be nice just to hear, before we get into specifics, why that's an important thing for you.
Yeah, I love talking about writing. In fact, today at 4 o'clock, I'm meeting with another writer. And so many people send me their books or hire me to work on their books. And really, if you can't capture your reader in the first chapter, in the first page, in the first paragraph, in the first line, you're not going to succeed. It's really as simple as that. And I think that a reader decides very quickly if they're in or they're out of a book, if the book has captured their imagination or not, if they care about the characters or not. So I have a kind of 5-point lecture that I can give you in 3 hours or 3 minutes. So I think we'll do the 3-minute version.
Let's do the 3-minute version.
Okay, so in 3 minutes, what you really, I believe, need to establish when you start a book is 5 things. You need to establish a character. You need to establish the setting, and you need to establish some kind of action. And there's always conflict between action and setting. If you look at every Shakespeare play, it always starts with, almost all of them start with some very dramatic event, but yet the characters are very real. I find a lot of American kind of thrillers, it's just someone jumping out of a helicopter to save the president, and you don't care about the person. Sometimes if you're reading like a French or an English novel, they're having tea or eating croissants for 3 or 4 pages. So there's always that tension between those 2 things. But those are the obvious first 3 points. And to me, the hardest thing to teach and to teach my writing students is to write in the voice of a character, to not write in a narrative voice, not be expositional, but really be inside the character. And finally, I think you have to have some emotion. You have to care about the character. So I'm not big on reading big sections of my books. I think that gets kind of boring. But I thought what I would do is read the opening paragraph of a few of my books, and then ask you and ask our participants to either give a thumbs up or thumbs down, because I really believe that within a paragraph, you're either in or you're out of a book. If it's interesting, if you look at all the Netflix stuff that's coming out now, you can see how the openings are so, and I'm learning in screenwriting, you know, if you go back and look at films, even 10, 15 years ago, everything started very slowly. Now, I don't think everything has to start with a bang action, but you have to develop a character quickly or something that matters to people. So what do you think? You like that idea?
Hey, it's your show. Let's do it.
Okay. So this is the first novel called Old City Hall. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph. Chapter 1. Much to the shock of his family, Mr. Singh rather enjoyed delivering newspapers. Who'd have thought that Gurdial Singh, former chief engineer for Indian Railways, the largest transportation company in the world, would be dropping newspapers at people's doors commencing at 5 a.m. each morning. He didn't need to work, but since coming to Toronto 4 years earlier, he had absolutely insisted on it, no matter that he was turning 74 years old on Thursday next. Yes, it was a silly little job he was forced to concede to his wife, Bimal, and her 3 daughters, but he liked it. So it took only 10 years to write Old City Hall, and it's very interesting. I've recently gone back and looked at all my notes from the book, and I've boxes and boxes of different versions. But that's just about the opening that I wrote right from the very beginning. I mean, of course, I changed many words and stuff, but so since I'm a mystery writer, and I have to tell you, I don't really think of myself as a mystery writer. I think of someone who's just writing about the city the way I see it. I start a lot of my books not with the main character, but with a minor character. So I think what I'll do is I'll read you a little bit of Stray Bullets. Stray Bullets was the 3rd book that I wrote. You can see the cover. I like to write about what's happening in the city. Stray Bullets was based on, I've been a criminal lawyer for 32 years. And when I started, there was very little gunplay in the city. There was, the occasional person was shot. But over the 32 years, I've seen the gunplay just getting worse and worse and worse. And back, it's actually more than 10 years now, but there was that terrible Boxing Day shooting in Toronto. I know you've lived in Toronto part of your life. And the young woman, Jane Kribo was killed. And it was actually right outside my office. I knew the judge, the Crown, the defense lawyers. And in a way, that was a turning point for the city, a real loss of innocence. So I never write books about actual events, but just I fictionalize what really is happening, I hope, in the city. So, and I guess an alert, there's one bad word in this.
Okay, I'll be prepared.
Okay. Chapter 1 of Stray Bullets. It was bad enough working in the donut shop of a minute. Sorry, it was bad enough working in the kitchen of a donut shop for minimum wage, but having to wear a hairnet was even worse, especially since the Tim Hortons uniform they made Jose Sanchez wear was at least a full size too big, made him look ridiculous, made it hard to talk to Suzanne, the pretty young server who worked out front. Not that it mattered. She had a boyfriend, a punk named Jet. And why would she be interested in an illegal immigrant to Canada, whose real name wasn't Jose Sanchez, but Dragomir Ozera, and who wasn't a chef from Portugal, as he told his employer, but was a Romanian linguistics student with a warrant out for his arrest. Fucking hairnet. See there, I got laughs.
Yeah, well, you know what? I've heard that word before, so I'm okay with that. You asked me, so what do I get out of the opening paragraph? I think what I get out of both of them, both the Old City and this one, is there's a character that I need to understand a little better. There's something interesting that's gone on in their life that you're alluding to. And I guess for me anyway, I want to know more. They seem like an interesting character. So I don't know if that's your intent, but certainly that keeps me wanting to turn pages. That's
what it's all about. And I think you want to get a sense that something is about to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you've got Downfall in front of you.
Yes.
Okay. So here's going to be your homework we're going to do.
Oh my God. All right. The reason I had a sleepless night. Okay.
So my theory about the first sentence, because I have lots of theories, is that the first sentence should start in one direction and take a turn you don't expect. So, and by doing that, in fact, I think it creates conflict within the sentence, tension within the sentence. If you go on Google and look at the 100 best sentences, first opening sentence of books, they're almost all like that. I didn't really consciously realize that as I was writing, but I've become more aware. And not only is the first paragraph important in the first sentence, but I want you, now you're going to be our reader, okay? So I want you to read the first word. Chapter 1, first word of Downfall.
Because.
Okay. Now, Mrs. Angus, my grade 8 grammar teacher, said you never ever start a sentence with because. With apologies to Miss Angus, I think the first word, you always want a why or what. Because what? Okay, so now read the first sentence.
Okay. Because the subways in Toronto didn't run early enough, Jember Rohan had no choice but to ride his bicycle to work.
So do you see what I mean? I mean, the first, he didn't have any, the subways didn't run earlier enough, and you didn't know what the consequence was going to be. Now, remember, we want to establish a character. Character isn't just one person, it's family, setting, action, voice. Okay, so now here's your job. I'm going to let you read the whole paragraph, okay?
The entire first paragraph?
Yeah.
Right from the beginning. Okay, here we go.
Handle it? Yeah.
All right, I'll do my best.
There we go.
I hope I won't butcher your words. I apologize in advance if I do.
It's nice to hear.
Because the subways in Toronto didn't run early enough, Jember Rohan had no choice but to ride his bicycle to work. His wife, Babita, was not pleased. And she says, in Canada, it is dark in November and you don't even have a light, she said when he was getting dressed to leave. She was right, of course, but what else could he do? They needed to buy diapers for their twins, and the rent on their one-bedroom apartment was due in a week. She says, or he says, I'll promise that I will be careful, he told her as he was rushing out the door, but she refused to kiss him goodbye. In 7 years of marriage, she had never done that before.
So there's my question. Are you in or you're out?
Well, I'm in because there's obviously you're setting up a potential danger, and I'm expecting that something's going to happen. So I got to keep going.
That's really the whole trick. The whole trick. And if you notice, I use words such as in the first book, Tuesday next, or what choice did he have? I kind of speaking in the voice of the character, not in my voice.
So look, we'll get to the some of the sort of specific subject matter in a minute, but just one more question of a general nature, which when we sort of wrapped up our initial briefing, I hinted at sort of a principle of advertising. I told you I was in the world of advertising, and one of the things that was always really critical to successful advertising was the role of emotion. And the way I explained it was to you, I said something like, the way advertising work is the heart seduces the mind.
Yeah,
and
I love that
idea. It's this idea that emotion, you play to the emotion, then you can play with the head when you work the emotion. So I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that as a technique or a principle for you.
Well, I'll tell you a secret. You can't tell anyone, but the murder mystery is really just an excuse to write about the characters. And the joy of having, now I have 6 books and I'm working on the 7th, is you can get so into their lives. And I think emotion is sometimes the thing that is lacking the most. If you don't really care about the characters, if you don't care what's going to happen right now to Jember Roshan as he gets on that bike early in the morning, then what's the point? I think it's emotion first. It's one of the problems I have with some of my students is they're much too didactic. I teach a lot of engineers and lawyers, and their books kind of read like memos. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, because in the end, if people really like your book, if they really, really like your book, then you were a failure. Because they have to fall in love with your characters. They have to fall in love with your writing and with the book. That's why all of us writers, we work so hard.
Well, we're going to come to some of the characters because, and again, I'll be careful not to say too much, but there were some characters that really caught me in this book. But let's set up the book and the principle or the storyline behind it. So you'd mentioned that it's set in Toronto, and so this is a 2-part question, I guess. First of all, you may want to talk about why Toronto. I know you talked about it was a soft place to live. Now it's a hard place to live. So Toronto for you as a setting is important. So that would be part of it. But the subject matter of Downfall is about homelessness and some crime that happens in that regard. So however you want to set it up, let's go.
Well, a lot of people said to me, why don't you set your books in the States? You could sell a lot more books, there's a bigger audience. But this is the world I know. This is the world I've always wanted to write about. And when I grew up in Toronto, it was a very boring place. As one of the characters says, it was a soft place. And now it is a hard place. There's a lot of conflict. And I think the main conflict I see right now, and all drama is conflict, is difference between rich and poor. I mean, when I grew up in the city, I never saw the kind of ostentatious wealth that we have now. And there weren't people sleeping in parks, sleeping in valleys, So what I did with this book, writers always talk about show and don't tell. So what I did in this book is I invented a fictional, really old money golf course on the Humber River, which is in the west part of the city. And right beside it, I put a homeless encampment. And then, this isn't giving too much away, somebody starts killing homeless people. So, I said someone the other day, I seem to be killing more people as my books go along. The first 4 books were just one little murder, and the last book there was 2, and this one I started talking about a serial killer, and that was before the whole serial killer thing happened in Toronto. But that's part of what happens when you get a real big city. You get the good and all the bad. So and then the other plot I have running through the book, I always like to have 2 or 3 plots running through the book, are 3 women who meet in law school, and they end up articling, which is what you do before you become a lawyer, at one of the big firms. And there are only 3 women of 15, and they really bond. They call themselves the 3 amigas. And I suspect, Mike, I think we all do, especially at our age. You have friends, we all start at the same place. And in some people's lives went to the stratosphere. Some people, like you and me, kind of bumbled along, did okay. But then there's some people who fell off. And you kind of look around and you look at people who they started the same place as you, and why did their lives turn out so badly? And so these 3 amigas, they all start in the same place. And one of them, Nancy Parrish, who's one of my continuing characters, she stays in the middle, but terrible things happen to one of her friends, and the other one seems to be doing very well. And I think it's something everyone can relate to. And I love writing about, I love having really strong female characters in the book. I mean, the books are pretty equal between male and female characters. So, so it's a combination of those 2. So one is the big story about the murder and the mystery, but the other story is about these 3 women and their relationship to each other.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you, I talked a little bit about that, and I don't know, I won't mention the one character in too much detail, but one of the 3 amigas is, it's exactly what you said. It's somebody who seems to have, they're the total package. They're bright, they're funny, they're competent, they're driven, they're caring, they're a bit crazy, maybe they're a caring character, but things happen to people along the way, and circumstances happen, and people can slip, and I guess hence the homelessness theme running through the book. Is it something that the idea of homelessness that has concerned you for some time in Toronto? Is it's moved from that soft place to a hard place? Is that one of the reasons you chose that topic?
Well, yeah. First of all, I'm a criminal lawyer. I have clients who are both very wealthy and who do pro bono work for. And one of them, James, he lets me use his name. He lived on and off the street for 30 years. A few years ago, I was keeping him going while he was living under the Sherbourne Street Bridge. So I see it really up close. I want to be really clear about something, Mike. I'm not a politician. I'm not an advocate. I'm not advocating for anyone. And in fact, a lot of the book shows the lives that I don't think gets seen very much, of the people who get left behind by homelessness. The husband whose wife falls downstairs and becomes a drug addict and abandons the family. The grandparents who end up raising their granddaughter because their daughter has become a drug addict. I've seen this a lot in my law practice. And I've seen, so it's part of our life in big cities. I was just talking to this reader in Germany. She said the same thing's happening there. The solutions aren't easy, but the one thing I know is the solution is not just turning away.
Yeah. Something might be interesting for the listeners, and certainly for myself, is as a criminal lawyer writing a mystery story, I always find myself wondering, how real is the portrayal that we're reading here of, we have a detective and we have what's going on in the detection of the crime and the pursuit of the criminal, the killer. We have courtroom scenes. Obviously, as that criminal lawyer, you have a real firsthand experience of the reality of those 2 streams within the criminal justice system. I'm curious to what degree you have reflected reality or taken some liberties.
Well, everything happens pretty quickly in my books. They don't happen so fast in real life. But one of my favorite scenes, in the scene that a lot of people in my world, judges and crown attorneys and defense lawyers, liked in the books, in every book, there's always a courtroom scene. And in this book, there's a courtroom scene where a character where, you know, I write in different points of view. So everyone is saying the defense lawyer and the Crown and the judge are saying one thing, but they really mean something else. You know, I write with a lot of humor. So it's both funny and meaningful. And I find people love seeing the inside of a lawyer's day, a lawyer's week. In some of the books, I take the readers into the robing room where we put our robes on. Sometimes in the offices preparing for, you know, since my writing career is done so well, I'm no longer doing the big long murder trials that I used to do, but I did them for years. And the drama, there's really nothing like it. It's I guess the only thing I could think of would be maybe being an ER surgeon or something like that, because when you're in the midst of a murder trial, your whole life is consumed by it. And yet, you know, I still had to get up at 5 a.m. and work on my books, and 7 a.m. I had to start making my kids their breakfast and lunches. So it's that pressure cooker of the courtroom that I think it's a wonderful thing to write about.
Well, on that point, I thought I could find it, but I didn't mark it down. But it's that very point, and one of the characters, and you know what? Maybe it might be Nancy, one of the characters who's obviously they're also a lawyer. But she says something about she's a bit tortured in the morning. She's wondering if she asked the right questions or not. And is that what you're referring to? You think about what you did the day before in the criminal trial. Did you ask the right questions? Did you have the right follow-up? Did you read between the lines properly? I mean, what are the things that, as a criminal trial lawyer, are those ones that really concern you as you work your way through the trial, hopefully to a successful outcome?
You know, I was watching some of the Derek Chauvin trial the other day, and they had a criminal lawyer on because they were criticizing the Crown. They said the prosecutor might have made a mistake. And then the lawyer who was on TV said, but I have to tell you, every lawyer, you sit up at 4 a.m, you go, oh my goodness, did I do the right thing? Should I ask that question? Did I ask too many questions? Didn't? So, I mean, that's part of life. You wake up in a cold sweat. I have a line that I say to my clients. I say, if I lose, I don't sleep. No, first I say, I like to win. And then I say, I hate to lose because if I lose, I don't sleep for about 4 nights. And I really like to sleep. I think the only way to be a really great criminal lawyer is to live inside the case and I think that's, you know, it's really, that pertains to everything, whether you're a chef or a gardener or anything. If you really have to throw yourself into it 100%.
What is the true relationship between the prosecution and the defense lawyer? I mean, again, that's one of those ones that, you know, you stories are told and you wonder, well, there is a game that's played in the courtroom, and then there's stuff that happens outside where you work together and things, or not. And maybe you could shed a little insight into that, because I think that's a fascinating part of the profession and is obviously part of what's going on in this book too.
Yeah, you know, I find I actually really dislike watching Law and Order because they always portray the defense lawyer as some kind of creepy person who's trying to get around the system. The thing almost always in Canada in particular is we kind of understand the roles. And I have a thing whenever I'm in court, the first thing I do is I walk up and shake hands with the Crown Attorney every single day. And, you know, in Canada, we refer to each other as my friend. Listen, I've done cases where my client's a complete jerk, and I'll walk into Crown's office a few days before, I'll say, look, we should settle this case. I can't settle this case. My client won't listen to me. I've got my job to do. You've got your job to do. And generally, there's kind of a camaraderie that what you understand is you're upholding something bigger than just the case you're doing. Let me repeat that. You're upholding something bigger than just the case you're doing, because you have an obligation as a member of the bar to properly execute trials. I mean, if you think of some of the horrible cases we've had in Canada in the last 10, 15 years, really horrible murder, horrible cases, but yet there's this determination that everyone's going to get a fair trial. And I think once you lose that, you've really lost the system. And so I think generally there's a real great respect for the system. Listen, we can go and we can fight like cats and dogs in court, but we understand we're staying within the bounds of what we have to do. Also, you develop a bit of a black humor. I mean, we all, always want to crack jokes. Eddie Greenspan once said to me, he said, my problem is sometimes I'm looking so hard for the joke that I forget about the case. But I can tell you in 32 years, I've had 2 Crown attorneys who acted very improperly towards me. And I don't like doing this, but both times I called their bosses and I said, listen, it's a hard job we have, but there's no excuse for being rude. And both times they called me back, apologized, and they both become friends. So I think we're quite fortunate. Now, the interesting thing is, my second book is all about a family law case gone wrong. It's an eve of a divorce. A very high profile guy is found killed. It's called The Guilty Plea. He's found murdered in his kitchen, and his wife, his former wife, is the suspect. So I spent about a year living in family law lawyers' offices, and I do a lot with family law lawyers. And I have to tell you that you can walk into a courtroom where there's a murder trial going on. It's quiet, it's peaceful. Then you walk into a courtroom where there's a family law custody dispute, and oh my goodness, the tension, and so I think generally we're pretty blessed in Ontario with the way in Canada with the bar is, and I don't sense that that's the same in the States.
All right, let's maybe bring it back to the book a little bit. There's a couple things, and then I'm going to just a heads up to Liz and Barbara if they had a question they wanted to ask of you. I see one comment here on the chat, which I'll read in a second, but it's sort of back to the book and there is a killer. And I remember when we first got on the phone, you surprised me, and I was with the question, which was something like, when did you know the killer did it? And I thought, geez, that's a good question. And what do I say here in a nanosecond? Do I pretend that I was really smart and I figured it out earlier? Or did I just come clean and not get caught up in a lie, which I'm talking to a criminal lawyer here. I got to be careful, right? So
right, you better be.
Yeah. I was very careful. I think honesty is the best policy at all times. So just maybe comment a little bit about how you think about, because you pointed out clues along the way and you were testing to see if I picked them up. And obviously I think I probably failed, but maybe just any sort of thinking that goes into dropping of those or sprinkling of clues that the really discerning reader and the smarter ones would probably pick up that maybe I didn't. Well,
the real thing is you can't cheat. You can't cheat the reader. You can't have someone jump out of a cupboard in Act 5 and, oh, that's the bad guy or the bad woman. So you have to make sure that everything fits. And I love it when I get email. I just got one today. Said, oh, I never guessed, and now I look back and I realize, oh, this and this and this. So you have to make what seems innocuous actually be meaningful. But not only that, you have to remember that the detectives, and in this case also the journalists, they have to kind of figure it out They have to figure it out. So my ideal thing is for a reader to get about 3/4 of the way through the book and think, I think I know, maybe I should go back and look. No, I just want to find out what happened. I like to say I write airplane reading for smart people. And usually people write me very upset because they didn't get to sleep last night because they just couldn't put it down, which is my goal. Steve Jobs said, simple is the hardest thing. And to write a simple, clean, and fun to read book is, well, that's what I try to do.
Okay. I got one last question,
Sure.
and then we'll see what else is out there. And you told me, I asked you what questions to stay away from. So this one is coming close to the edge, but not actually asking it directly. So obviously you have inspiration from events you know, when you write something, but then at some point your creativity really, you dig into your creativity and you know, you describe a murder or a sex scene or something like that. And I always wonder, what do writers, family and friends think when they read their friend's book and they look at these scenes and they go, my God, I had no idea what was going on in your mind. Are you crazy or what? Any comments on something like that?
Well, I have 3 children and 3 brothers, and none of them read my books. So and I actually, at first, I was kind of upset about that, but now I think it's much better. One of my brothers started reading one of my books. He said, "Bobby, I can't read it. I just know you too well." I said, "That's good. That's good." But I think maybe my grandchildren will read my books one day. But you know, it's fiction. It's funny because I've never murdered anyone before, but I have been very close to a lot of murder trials. So I'm lucky. I have a whole group of people who help me. I have a former homicide detective who I'm very close with. I have a lot of doctors who help me, my forensic people. So I make sure all of those details are as accurate as possible. I have to tell you, I make one little mistake. I get so many emails. I use the term biscotti, and apparently in Italian, a biscotti is plural, not singular. So you see, I learn something every time, and the copy editors didn't catch that.
All right. Look, because I'm technically illiterate, for some reason, I'm not seeing there are quite a few people in attendance right now. I'm being reminded by our tech help. And so there may be some questions here and I don't see it. So, but I do see that both Liz and Barbara have turned off their mute buttons. I don't know if either of them wants to ask a question on behalf of somebody, or they themselves have a question, or can perhaps somehow bring a panelist into it. But I'm going to, at this stage, with about 5 minutes, 7 minutes left, ask for either David, Liz, or Barbara just to help me with getting some panelist questions on board here. So
I see Debbie wrote, the whole first chapter had me on the edge of my seat, but you very quickly made us care about what happened to him.
yeah, that was, yeah. So there you go. Another person agrees that you nailed it in that first paragraph or two. So, but I don't see the other questions. David or Liz or Barbara, are either of you able to jump in here, and maybe we can put Robert on the spot for another 5 minutes.
One of the things, while we're waiting, I can tell you, one of the things, I start a number of the books with very minor characters. And if anyone out there is thinking of writing, you don't always have to start with the main character. And often a minor character can kind of bring you into the story in a very subtle way. And it can really set the scene. So that's like, I like giving little writer's tips. So that's one of my writing tips. And I think it's important to, the other thing is, you know, really there's no minor characters. Even if a character only has 2 or 3 paragraphs in the book, you have to really understand everything about them. You have to really know everything about them. And someone's
okay. Here are you seeing some of this now?
Did you always want to be a writer? You had a full career as a defense lawyer. Was it something you always wanted to do? The answer is yes. I actually never wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to be a writer. I don't quite know when. It's recently I've gone back and I've looked at stuff I was writing in high school. I came from a family of really great readers, and my older brother David is also a writer. But I always wanted to be a writer. And in fact, I kind of went to law school as a default because I really wasn't sure what to do. And criminal law always came easily to me. But then I spent 10 years not being a lawyer. I spent 10 years as a magazine editor, as a radio producer at CBC. And that's how I really learned how to tell stories. And I think the ability to tell stories is everything. As a criminal lawyer too, it's made me a much more successful criminal lawyer. And now it's beyond my wildest dreams that the books would be published and I'd meet all these famous authors whose books I read. But I have to tell you, Mike, they all say to me, you're so lucky to be a criminal lawyer because you have all these stories come in your office all the time. And it's true. Every day, something new comes into my office and I can't make this stuff up. So I'm very lucky that way.
Well, I guess it's a steady stream of material. I see a question here. It says, at the library, we're always most interesting what people are reading. Robert, what could you tell us about what you're reading right now or what you'd suggest?
I really